We are ready to rumble. Well. Welcome back to Monsta TV. I am Fred, your friendly neighborhood alien, totally politically incorrect, etc., red-pilled and all. And today we're going to tackle the subject of the sexual revolution. And I have a cute little video here that will give us an oversight of the whole history of it all. And I thought it was really interesting to kind of get a background to what actually happened and how all this degeneracy came about. Because it is degeneracy, there is no doubt. And, you know, this whole thing, let me do what the hell I want to, and I don't care what anybody else thinks, moral relativism and all of that, is quite something. You know, people change their mind about morale and ethics as soon as they're on the other side of the person who is living out as they please. Then all of a sudden, you know, they do want certain ethical structures that you could say are rooted in Christianity. In fact, you can prove that they are. So I thought this was one of the clearest videos I've seen in a while. And in fact, it's more the thing that is kind of compact. Okay, it's about half an hour long or something. And it's nice and compact. And we kind of got step by step right into today. And it's a couple of years old, actually. It came out 2 years ago. So a couple of things have happened since then. So let's have a look and get this thing queued up. Here we are, and let's go.
Sexual morality is one of the biggest aspects of any civilization. How the family and the relationship between man and woman are understood has major effects that ripple through all of society.
No shit, Sherlock.
For over 1,000 years, Western nations lived by Christian sexual morality. Christianity, especially Catholicism, teaches that sexuality is meant for marriage, and violating this standard is a sin. Things like pornography, divorce, and homosexuality were treated as bad in the West for most of its recorded history. The supposedly liberal attitudes of the Greeks and Romans are wildly exaggerated. They too believed in strict sexual standards, although slightly different from the Christian morality that would come later. It's really only relatively recently that standards of sexual morality began to wildly change in the West. This became known as the sexual revolution. It helped usher in a new regime in the Western world that we still live under today.
I had to try out that button. I'm sorry. I had to try it out.
Unfortunately, this is nowhere more obvious than in the United States. The US is a country that's gone through different eras. When you go back to the beginning of the 20th century, America was a very different country from what it is today. In those days, 95% of the country identified as Christian. Abortion, pornography, contraception, and sodomy were all illegal and morally frowned upon.
Yeah, when that is, you know, have a look how much more beautiful that was. I'm not saying how much more beautiful it looked. I'm just saying the whole feeling of it. Women were just walking down the streets. They didn't have to, you know, be careful about some Muslims wanting them to cover up or anything like that. If you touched a woman at that time, you were beaten half to death. Rightly so.
Divorce and illegitimacy were legal, but rare. And the divorce that was legal wasn't the no-fault kind we have today. The progressive movement of the time period was concerned with strengthening the country's moral values. This was known as being anti-vice. Of course, this is all very different from modern America. In the 2020s, a majority of Americans have developed libertarian attitudes on moral and sexual issues. Many of the vices that were once illegal are now allowed. Casual sex, abortion, and divorce are common. Christianity has declined and been replaced by what can only be called a widespread sense of nihilism.
Yeah, nihilism, the belief that life and morality are meaningless. Well, you know, I think that if that's the case, then it would be meaningless also for you to be against any type of religiosity, like any type of morale. Because morality is meaningless and life itself is meaningless, then I think that you should just simply go, leave, like dig yourself a grave and put yourself out of misery. Because the thing is that if that is the truth for you, which you can't know if that is true for everybody or if that's true as such, all you know is it's true for you, well then it is totally meaningless to be discussing or debating morality of others. Because it's meaningless. Everything is meaningless. You see, all these people and their stupid arguments, they always just fall apart. Why are they protesting? Why are they doing anything in that direction and wanting to, get people over to their side? Why would they want to? It's meaningless. Like, where's the meaning in, having everybody believe in meaninglessness? You are a pack of stupid fuckers.
Nihilism being the belief that nothing matters and that morality doesn't exist. Clearly, this modern era is an extreme break from the past of Western nations. Yet, in America, even in its current state, people seem to instinctively know that there's something deeply wrong with how things have become. Polls have consistently shown that most Americans are upset with the morality of the country. A majority think morals have gotten much worse, and they rate the morality of America as poor. So when we compare America of the early 1900s and America of the 2020s, the burning question that must be answered is...
Isn't it just amazing how many women are into this whole thing? Did you ever notice that, it's always being said about men that they only think about one thing. But, they build ships, like you see there. They build houses and roads and cars and airplanes and cell phones and microphones and what the hell have you. They invent all sorts of music and the rest of it. Everything that we enjoy is made and invented and by men, right? But then you have this liberal, it's not even liberal, this disgusting movements of, everybody should have sex with everybody, and it's all women and gay men. I mean, why don't you just do your disgusting shit? Look at OnlyFans. As soon as women are free to do, and they don't have to be, at home, in the kitchen and tie down the poor creator. As soon as they are free to do what they want, they are whores. They just become whores, disgusting, degenerate whores. Isn't that just something? Who's always thinking about sex? Who is just taking sex and using it as a currency? Who's doing that, huh?
What happened? There's no one simple answer, but there are certain threads that can be followed. The sexual revolution is one of the biggest things that must be explained.
Have a look at that picture. Have a look. I'm not kidding. It's all fucking women. I'm trying to keep down the cursing a tiny bit, We'll see, because we just opened a YouTube channel, so Monsta TV is on YouTube now. Yesterday, I just posted a video just to have a video there. But, yeah, I'm trying to keep the cursing down a little until, or maybe even not. Maybe I can't help myself. Maybe I don't want to help myself. We'll see.
The movement came to its head in the 1950s and 60s. It sought to change America's relatively modest moral values to an unrestricted free-for-all. An America of strong families was turned into a mess. The world we live in today is in many ways a product of this revolution. In this video, we'll be looking at exactly where the sexual revolution came from and how it's had devastating effects for American morality. To truly understand the sexual revolution, we have to understand several key things. First, Christianity, the historic religion of the West, and its relationship to sex. Christian sexual morality has many rules and is not what today would be called liberal. First of all, the Bible contains many passages condemning sexual immorality. For example, sodomy, bestiality, adultery, cross-dressing, and more are all directly condemned in various biblical passages. Jesus said clearly in the book of Matthew that marriage is between one man and one woman for life.
And it makes sense. It's not just like, it's not an invention. Oh, I just invented it because I think it's better, or I like to constrain myself or something like that. It's because that's the way a family is. That's the way a family is constructed. A woman and a man come together and they have children. And you've found out through all sorts of statistics and all sorts of research that, of course, the man and woman stay together and they have several children is better for the children than a woman having several men or a man having several women. It's better for the children.
The Christian churches developed doctrines that reflected this modest sexual morality. As such, modesty and chastity are Christian virtues, while lust and hedonism are sins. Satan is not only a manipulator but a tempter who offers people short-term pleasure at the expense of their eternal soul. Christianity deepened and fully explained the concept of natural law developed by the ancient Greek philosophers. By this account, sexual morality wasn't a matter of arbitrary or changing value, but of objective truth. Modesty and chastity are virtues because they push man towards the full realization of his nature and finality. In other words, there is a natural order for human sexuality ordained by God, and it is objectively correct for humans to obey it.
Yes, and it's not just because it comes from God, because you see, if you go that reasoning, and that's the difficulty of it all. People say, yeah, well, where is your God? And they will also want to find out why. Like, why does God say that? Is there a good reason for it, like something logical, something that we can, understand? And of course there is. Every type of research, as I just said, has concluded that it is true, that it is better. It's better for everybody, actually, for man and woman as well. Now, there is a certain excitement in doing something that is forbidden. We all know that, right? That there is this certain excitement. But it's not really, it's forbidden, you see. Otherwise, you don't have the excitement. As soon as you take that away, then it's not exciting anymore. Look, who gives a damn about gays anymore? Who gives a shit? So get married and leave us alone with your crap. So what they have to do is they constantly have to renew this, oh, we're not allowed, and people are against it. No, man, it's just that not everybody is for it. It's the same with feminism. And they still have to pretend as if they're oppressed in some way, because nobody gives a damn anymore. Well, go ahead, don't marry, screw around all you want. We don't care, we don't want you. And now it's like, oh, we're still oppressed. What? Where? What laws are there to oppress you? What are you not allowed to do what men are allowed to do? Get out of here, you crap. No, there is a logical thing. We are made in a certain way, and we notice that it's better for everybody involved.
This is the basis of much of Catholic moral philosophy. All of this is why Christians oppose sexual liberation. With all of that understood, we should next look at the history of the United States, and especially the American founding. These things would have major implications in the moral development of America, and eventually, the sexual revolution itself. America began as a British colony. As such, it inherited the Protestant direction that England had been going down since King Henry VIII. England, of course, was a Catholic nation historically, but had broken from the church during the reigns of King Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth I in the 1500s. Therefore, Protestantism was the dominant religion in the young US. However, Catholics were tolerated in certain parts of the country. The religious views of the American Founding Fathers were complicated. Most came from America's Protestant background and believed that religion was critical to American society. Some, like Jefferson and Madison, were more deistic. They picked and chose what parts of God and the Bible they believed in based on what they deemed rational. This was contrasted by founders such as Samuel Adams and John Jay, who was president of the American Bible Society. As I said, the religious views of the founders were diverse and complicated. In any case, the American founding was also heavily influenced by the ideas of the so-called Enlightenment and the philosophy of John Locke. Locke emphasized what he called natural rights granted by God that could be determined through reason alone. He also advocated
which is quite stupid. You could reason why the rights given by God are logical. You can reason them, right? But that you wouldn't need God is stupid, of course, because how many people believe in what Locke said? There's lots of different types of philosophies, and there's lots of people contradicting him. This is the whole point. Yes, you might rationalize, and you might be able to have a logical explanation for certain things that God says in the Bible, but that doesn't mean that we don't need God. Do you understand? Because the fact is that what will people do every single time they're left to their own devices? What will they do? They will just choose whatever it is that they want at the moment. It's always different if they get onto the other side of morale and people doing what they want, as I said at the beginning.
Difference of the state toward religion. This was very different from traditional governing philosophy, where the state tended to work with the church towards religious objectives. The founders adopted many of Locke's ideas, and what they created became known as American liberalism.
You see, the thing is that if you have something like an authority, like the church or God himself, I'm not a fan of the church, okay? But, of course, the Bible is an authority. If you have that authority, you're going to have to argue against that. And that's going to be very difficult if it is logical and if it actually serves the purpose of humans being able to live together in peace. And there's always this strange force, this strange thing, we'll get into that later, that is always working against people living peacefully together. They don't have to live together in the same damn house, but they live together on Earth, don't they? And how do we do that? And there is certain, let's say laws of morality, we call that ethics, that if we adhere to them, we could leave each other alone to such a degree that we don't have to bash each other's heads in. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Since the founders were of various Christian denominations and some deists, they wrote religious tolerance into the U.S. Constitution. Some of the founders wanted a vague form of Christianity to be made the official religion of the federal government, but this proposal lost out. The founders were not religiously orthodox, but they were also not hardcore secularists who believed that religion should be banned from public life like modern atheists do. John Adams famously said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other." But despite the founders admiring religion, the Constitution and American liberalism put vague ideas of liberty and equality above all else, even God. American founding ideology also never resolved the conflict between objective morality and natural law versus moral relativism and apathy. All of this opened the door for negative long-term consequences for American morality.
This whole thing about moral relativism, that can only work if you keep that shit to yourself. Like, if you want to, I want to live my life the way I want to live my life. Well, if that doesn't influence the life of anybody else, go ahead, but leave me the hell alone. You understand? But this whole thing about morale is not what you do to yourself and how you live, inside of your own house. And even children shouldn't be influenced by it, right? By your moral relativism. Morality is only needed if there is another person that you have influence upon, okay? Whatever it is, that kind of influence that you may have on this person. That's where morality exists. If you were the only person on earth, you can do what the hell you want. There is no ethical or moral anything that could talk or could say or debate anything against what it is that you want to do. You can't do any harm unto yourself, you can, but not unto anybody else. Morality will only be of any importance when there is another person and you want to whatever with them, you see? That's why moral relativism is complete crap. It's like an actual complete mountain-high load of bullshit.
American federal judge and author Robert Bork wrote, "The signers of the Declaration of Independence took the moral order they had inherited for granted. It did not occur to them that the document's rhetorical flourishes might one day become dangerous if that moral order weakened." All of this background is very important for future events that would take place in the sexual revolution. America's lack of official religious direction, combined with it being founded on vague notions of liberty, would go on to be exploited heavily for so-called sexual liberation, far beyond the intentions of any of the founders. If they saw the things many people do today, they would tar and feather them, to say the least. For example, colonial America had many different anti-obscenity laws, including laws against buggery, also known as sodomy. At the time of the Revolution and after it, this offense carried severe penalties, and no founding father ever expressed a problem with that. All of this notwithstanding, Christianity remained the dominant religion of the US through the 1700s, 1800s, and early 1900s. Most of this was Protestant denominations, but Catholics did make up an important minority, and their importance would increase as time went on. In fact, by 1900, Catholicism was the largest single church within the United States. By the early 1900s, the United States was a global superpower and one of the wealthiest countries in the world. During this time period, the government still banned things like porn, abortion, sodomy, etc.
It looks awesome, doesn't it? I mean, it just looks wonderful. The way people dressed and all the rest of that. I don't know if I want it all back, but I think there's something beautiful about it. And there's something, I don't know, certain harmony in all of it.
Devout Christians like Anthony Comstock used their government positions to fight hard against vice and degeneracy. The Comstock laws were a series of laws that banned the transport of obscene material through the mail, and they were strictly enforced. Liberty in America was not seen as liberty to do whatever you wanted, and
oh, isn't that interesting? It's about freedom, but if your freedom takes the freedom of somebody else, right, it takes that away, then how can you be saying that you advocate for freedom? If it is supposed to be the freedom for everybody, then of course your freedom can't be so free to take away the freedom from somebody else. So how do we do that? Nobody has ever really thought about that. You know, they always talk about individual freedom. Well, what about the other individual that you want to be so free upon? Yeah, liberation. God damn it. You know what? The more you learn that there's more to learn, number one. And then the other thing is, the more you get really annoyed with people who intentionally keep themselves stupid. And it is intentional because they know very well what the next idea is from where they're standing, right? If you walk along a path, you know where the next step is. And if you come to the border of a town, but you know that there are certain, laws inside of this town, and you know that already, then you don't want to take that step, because as soon as you cross the border into that town, you're going to have to adhere to the law of this town. And this is the kind of thing that intentionally stupid people do. They just don't want to go that other step to the next conclusion, because they would know that their own mind, you see, their own thinking would kind of force them to adopt a more, let's say, ethical way of living.
in fact, it was the mainstream view that to truly protect liberty in society, hedonism had to be restrained. If you watched my video on the French Revolution, you will have heard the difference between positive liberty and negative liberty. Positive liberty is the view that true freedom comes from being allowed to pursue virtue. This is contrasted by the view of negative freedom, which asserts that freedom comes from lack of personal restraints.
Yeah, do as thou wilt, right? The devil's law. That's the devil's law.
But despite America's success, there were cracks in the foundation. Freedom of religion meant that Christianity, despite its power, had no official, legal position as part of the federal government. This left openings for anti-Christian actors to enter and subvert the state. At the same time, affluence and decadence had begun to make Americans complacent and materialistic. Already in the 1920s, President Calvin Coolidge warned the country against what he called pagan materialism. Like most educated Americans of his day, President Coolidge believed that Christianity and morality were absolutely vital to American societal health, and he worried that America's rapidly increasing affluence could undermine them. Religion is strongest when life is hard, and is seen by many as an inconvenience when life is easy. People start to believe that material goods are a valid replacement for the divine, and that technology is a valid replacement for God.
Isn't that's just diabolical, isn't it? And the more we are free to do things, the more we are not held down and oppressed by our own having to work for every breadcrumb that we want to eat, the more decadent we become. And the more decadent we become, the more ethics wander out the door. Look at the Romans. Look what happened there. You know, what was the fall? What was the reason for the fall of that empire? In every single time you have an empire that develops and has its people, getting rich, let's say well off, all of a sudden they get real decadent. They want to screw everything that walks on 2 or 4 legs, and everything falls apart. It's disgusting, and it's quite easy to kind of think about that. And that's the kind of stuff we should be learning in school, in history. You know?
They're wrong, of course, but this thinking becomes more common with societal affluence. To make matters worse, World War I created a sense of nihilism and sadness that spread across the whole Western world. European civilization and history started to be called into question.
And you wonder why that even happened. If you think about the way morality developed its downward path, and the way there was always something working against it, like the church, for instance, and Christianity as such, something had to be done to weaken Christianity. Something had to be done in order to be able to, destroy morale.
To this day, most of the European countries who fought in World War I never regained the power and influence they had prior to the war. Pope Benedict XV referred to World War I as the suicide of civilized Europe. The forces who were hostile to European civilization saw this as their opening to start seizing power.
Oh, I see. Now, is that opportunism? Is that like being opportunistic and saying, look, let's get into this while we can? Or, is there a plan? And if you think about people and their planning ahead, you'd have to assume that there was some sort of a plan. And it was all about, because Europe was really powerful. If you just take a look around Europe and have a look at the history of Europe, it was really powerful. And it all built up upon Christian ethics. And as soon as you destroy those ethics, as soon as you destroy morale, demoralize, others can come in, all that. The bugs can come in.
It's no coincidence that after the war, Marxism and modern art grew vastly in popularity. At the same time, America's Protestant elites began to lose their faith and turn their attention to money-making. They also began to adopt early aspects of the sexual revolution. Anglicanism, for example, approved birth control as morally valid in 1930. By the 1950s, most Protestants had become pro-birth control. Many Christian denominations became about being nice or being tolerant rather than any serious moral values.
If you need my tolerance, I know that you have set your mind upon getting on my damn nerves. Because otherwise you wouldn't need my damn tolerance, would you? And I don't want to be nice. Now, I'm a polite person, and as long as you don't step on my foot, I'm going to be tolerant. Because in the sense of that, I will tolerate you in my presence. You know what I'm saying? But if you want my tolerance, I know what it is that you want from me. You want to be a nuisance.
And when your goal is simply to be nice, it's easy to be manipulated and walked all over. Nice and good are not the same thing, and being good often requires a person to not be nice or tolerant. Unfortunately, over the years, this confusion about being nice became a serious problem for Christian America. On top of this, Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe also came to the US and began to promote their own morality, which was often directly at odds with the majority Christian morality.
Oh, hold a second. How can that be? Judean Christian values, how could their morality be different? That was a surprise. That surprised me.
Jewish sources note how they became prominent in Hollywood and the media industry, and this would have a profound impact on America. American Jews tended to be more permissive on all issues relating to sex than the general population.
You're kidding. You must be kidding.
But there was some backlash to the slipping of American standards. American Catholics were one of the last groups fighting for traditional sexual morality, and they stepped up. They created the Hays Motion Picture Production Code, a censorship code that Catholic businessmen forced Hollywood and the film industry to follow. It banned all sexual degeneracy from film, and Hollywood for many years obliged. If Hollywood didn't oblige, Catholics would boycott their films and devastate their profits. On top of banning things like sex and nudity, the code required that no picture shall be produced that will lower the moral standards of those who see it.
What a beautiful sentence. Lower the moral standards of those who watch the movie. You know, this whole thing, I can't remember what movie it was in, where he says everybody in the room is now more stupid after having listened to you. I can't remember what the exact quote was, but like, this is kind of weird, right? So you watch a movie and it would lower your moral standards? Wow, because I mean, if you make a movie, you know what you're doing. You know what you're putting into the movie. I mean, it has to be written, it has to be spoken, it has to be filmed and all the rest of it. So you know exactly what you're putting into the movie. So there had to be an intention to lower the moral standards for it to be in there, so that those who watch it would, you know, experience that lowering of the moral standards. Like, what the fuck? What the fuck?
Hence, the sympathy of the audience should never be thrown to the side of crime, wrongdoing, evil, or sin. These standards would remain in place for over 30 years and produce some of the best films in American history.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But despite these gains, dark clouds were on the horizon. World War II and its aftermath would change everything. In the wake of the rise of fascism and communism, the new field of psychology began to be used for political objectives. It started to paint traditional sexual values as a contributor to what he called authoritarian tendencies. Sexual liberation.
Yes, of course. You're an authoritarian if you want people to have, you know, sexual morale. Oh, you just want to rule me. You just want to rule over me. I can't go around and do all that fucking degenerate shit. Amazing.
Was proposed as the supposed antidote. The psychologists decided that Western morality would have to be destroyed and replaced in order for fascism to never rise again.
Amazing, isn't it? I mean, if you look at it, it seems like an actual plan. You know, Christianity was just too good. It was just too good. It was just too embarrassing for everybody else, for all the degenerates. It can't be anything else, because why would you want to do that? Like, what the hell? Be as a degenerate as you want to be, but no, everybody else has to accept it too. Isn't it? That's just it, isn't it?
Many of these psychologists were directly funded by American intelligence agencies, like the CIA, who found their ideas useful in de-radicalizing political opposition to American liberalism. To quote the 2002 British documentary Century of the Self, those in power used Freud's theories to try to control the dangerous crowd in the age of mass democracy. Psychology ceased being about trying to understand the human mind and became about controlling it. The decadence and materialism that had already been developing in America was vulnerable to this exploitation. The sexual revolution had begun.
And I don't see one exploited woman here at all. They love this, they love undressing. I remember Pearl said that there a while ago. If you gave us the permission, we would all just be naked. Women just want to show themselves. It's just, that's the only bloody thing that they have in their mind. That's how it comes across anyway.
The invention and spread of the home television would prove decisive in changing the morality of America. In 1950, only around 15% of American households had a television, but by 1960, that figure had risen to 85%. As the years went by, houses bought multiple TVs which kids could use without their parents' supervision. Almost every TV channel during this time was controlled by one of three networks: ABC, NBC, and CBS. These networks were heavily tied to US intelligence agencies who used them to push their ideological agenda. This was known as Operation Mockingbird, and today, far from being a conspiracy theory, it's a matter of public record. When the Cultural Revolution
And never stopped, by the way. It never stopped.
began in the 1960s, news stations gave the protesters overwhelmingly positive coverage. Meanwhile, those who defended American culture and Western traditions were painted as the villains. A new pop culture based on the latest shows, movies, and music began to develop in America, replacing much of its ancient European culture that had been passed down for generations. This resulted in deracination, or, in other words, the loss of people's roots. The cultures of Hollywood and Washington, D.C. were exported to the entire United States, and regional cultures started to decline. Despite the motion picture production code still being in effect, the TV and film industry began to push the boundaries of sexual morality. The capitalistic pursuit of profit and the liberal pursuit of sexual hedonism ended up being a match made in heaven.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird that you would push for that, as if there's no other topics. I mean, it was kind of disgusting the way that it's come back a bit now, right, in movies. But you always had sex scenes in movies. It was just totally normal. But why would you want that? I've never missed them, ever. And they were always kind of embarrassing. Oh my God, get it behind you. Just get on with it.
Or should we say, hell. By the mid-1960s, the production code was broken so often that it was abandoned entirely. The floodgates were now open for total media degeneracy, and companies happily obliged. Sex, drugs, abortion, homosexuality, and more all flooded American culture. Both high-level institutions and youth movements were the backbone of the new sexual culture. Elite universities began broadcasting pornography to their students and encouraged them to attend. Liberal and Marxist professors saw the 60s as their opportunity to finally destroy the long-held Christian values of the West, that they had always opposed, but they could now paint as authoritarian and fascist.
Now, let that sink in. First of all, that they have always opposed, and they were only waiting for their chance, and all this happened totally organically. All right? All that happened totally organically, all right? But they have always opposed it, and now they take the opportunity. Now they go for it. Because now is just the floodgates are open. But why? Right? Always ask yourself why. What is this good for? And you see the soldiers there. And they call them, of course, fascists. Because you want sexual morale. You're a fascist. And that we see today everywhere. When you're talking about, look, maybe it's not such a great idea to abort babies. Oh, but they're not babies. Well, what the hell else do you think they are? There's no other ways of having human beings than this particular process. And if you stop that process anywhere, you don't have humans. So why wouldn't it be unethical? And then you have all these contraceptives. And why do we still abort babies if you have all these contraceptives?
But where the sexual revolution truly found success was in the judicial system. With American society being rapidly morally transformed from the top down, judges began to do their part. In the 1947 case Everson v. Board of Education, the Supreme Court commanded states that they could not grant religious privileges to anyone. Prior to that point, states didn't have to abide by freedom of religion as outlined in the federal Constitution, and they often gave Christians preferential treatment. So really, separation of church and state as we know today is less than 80 years old. This decision set the stage for a new form of secularism so severe that it would be fair to call it anti-religious. The Supreme Court then took direct aim at America's morality.
But it's not, is it? It's not anti-religion. Because, you're can't be anti-Islam, and you can't be anti-Jews, and Judaism. No, it's anti-Christian. The Antichrist. okay? If you're an anti-Semite, well, you're an antichrist. Think about it. Antichrist isn't just a person. Antichrist is what is antichrist. What it's not just against, because the word anti means in place of, in older definitions, but it also means to be against, right? So it is actually anti-Christian, antichrist. It's the antichrist.
Anti-pornography laws were the first thing to be gutted. Roth versus United States in 1957 and Miller v. California rendered all anti-pornography laws effectively moot. Birth control was the next thing to be legalized nationwide in 1965 with Griswold versus Connecticut.
I don't have a big problem with birth control. If it's just like, condoms and stuff like that. If a woman wants to take the pill and throw her entire hormone household out of whack, that's her thing. Birth control is probably the most, let's say, the softest thing here. But like pornography, why would you want to legalize it? It's not just about legalizing it. It's supposed to be everywhere. You can go online and just, I want to watch a porno or something. And then kids can watch it. It's disgusting. Why would you want to do that? Remember demoralizing that thing? Why demoralize? People are much easier to control. That's the weird thing. Morals and ethics are supposed to be a kind of self-control. But if people are out of control, you would need external control, right?
Author E. Michael Jones explains why contraception is so significant. It's the thin end of the wedge that disconnects sex from its natural purpose of reproduction. And once sex loses its original purpose, moral chaos isn't far behind.
True, that's true. But on the other hand, it's still the softest part. As you said, it's the very tip of the whole wedge that is supposed to be driven in there. But we could deal with that still, if everything else stayed in place.
If you want my honest opinion, the Cultural Revolution was the legalization of contraception. The sexual revolution followed from that, abortion followed from that, and homosexual rights is only the logical consequence of the use of the contraceptive.
And he was absolutely proven right.
Yeah.
After the legalization of contraception in the 1960s, abortion followed with Roe v. Wade in the 1970s.
Does that make any sense? I mean, look at that. Birth control, all right, and then abortion. Well, if you have birth control, there should be the least amount of abortions. By the way, that was the argument at the time. So, what the hell happened there? Why do we have more abortions than ever before birth control was even there? It's just crazy stuff. These people are not actually thinking. It's just pushing through their agendas. And their agendas have nothing to do with this thing at the front of it all. We're looking at laws here that get put aside, and let's allow all of these things. But the reason for why, the agenda in the background, you don't get to see them because you have all these debates and people, throwing stuff at each other and, let's go protest and all the rest of that. We don't get to see the actual agenda.
Each new aspect of sexual behavior that was legalized flowed from the exact same anti-Christian, hyper-individualist moral philosophy that personal pleasure is the highest value of life.
Imagine that. Just imagine the stupidity in that.
This has continued into modern America with things like the LGBT movement and transgenderism. The slippery slope was real, because the same arguments for legalizing porn can be copy-pasted to all other sexual issues. Over the years, the American left became increasingly anti-Soviet and fully embraced individualistic arguments about personal freedom. This encyclopedia entry defines the new left as a mix of Marxism and libertarianism that focused on gender, race, and sexuality issues rather than class like the old left. From a philosophical standpoint, the sexual revolution justified itself through the ideas of people like John Stuart Mill. Mill wrote in his 1859 book On Liberty, "Liberty consists in doing what one desires."
Wow. There we have it. At last the devil speaks.
No other line better encapsulates the sexual revolution than this. Mill advocated a form of radical individualism that created an adversarial relationship between the individual and society. One could of course criticize this ideology by saying that society-wide ills affect all individuals in one way or another, but I digress. But Mill's ideas were far from the only philosophy that drove the sexual revolution. A variety of psychologists, writers, and scientists all pushed it forward. I'll go through some of the most important ones. First, we have Alfred Kinsey. Originally an insect zoologist, he was paid by the CIA-backed Rockefeller Foundation to change his research to humans. He authored such works such as Sexual Behavior of the Human Male. The book claimed that sexuality was a spectrum, and people should be able to identify as whatever they want. He also created the Kinsey scale, which asserted that people do not fit into binary sexual categories. Then there was John Money. He performed transgender experiments to try to prove gender was socially constructed.
This is one of the most evil motherfuckers that you'd ever come across. And if you imagine that they cite this guy, the whole transgender movement cites this guy.
This involved forcing a young boy to live as a girl and having him perform sexual acts on his own twin brother.
Yeah, because there was an accident when they tried to circumcise him when he was a baby. So they decided to just simply, they decided for this kid, right, that he would be a girl. And John Money was like taking care of these kids.
Both twins had lifelong trauma from the experiment and would later commit suicide.
Yeah.
I wish I was making this up, but no, it really happened. The names of the victims in Money's experiments were Brian and David Reimer. Today, the case has finally attracted the infamy and criticism that it rightly deserves.
Not really, though. Not really. It's not that the left has in any way taken this on and talked about it properly. Alright? Let's just upvote this guy because he's doing a great job with his video.
Theodor Adorno of the Frankfurt School was another key intellectual who pushed the revolution forward. He authored The Authoritarian Personality, a bestseller that declared all people with traditional sexual values were potential fascists.
There you go. It's just unbelievable, isn't it? It's unbelievable. To have morale and to have ethics is fascist. Amazing. That's how you do this. That's how this works. Brilliant. I mean, it's just weird how simple this crap is. And nobody wants to be called a fascist, of course, right? Nobody wants to be called a Nazi, of course not. And that's why, oh shit, like, we better keep our mouth shut. Damn.
The purpose of the book was to attempt to pathologize people who preferred normal sexual views and family life. The male-led family model itself was identified as something that creates fascism, and a new genderless family model would have to take its place to protect democracy. Yes, that is really what the book says. Then there was Michel Foucault. He was a French homosexual and pro-pedophilia writer. He petitioned France to abolish its age of consent laws and demanded that children be given the individual freedom to consent to sex with adults.
Look, this is the whole thing, right? There's certain boundaries you're not supposed to step over if you're talking about morale, because that's what it is. Boundaries, right? Now, if you keep pushing that boundary, sometimes, at some stage, you come across the boundary of no boundaries. There is no more boundaries, right? That's what is going to happen, obviously, because you've just stepped over everything. So this whole progressiveness to progress is just going to end in no boundaries whatsoever. And that's supposed to be what? Obviously, in Christian terms, that's the devil. Of course it is. And it's going to what? It's going to do what? Well, if there's no boundaries, you know what's going to happen to these people? Because, why should the Christians then restrain themselves from just stopping it all? And stopping it in aggressive, very aggressive forms, right? Why should they? By these people's philosophy, there is no boundaries. So why should there be any more boundaries? for anybody else.
His writings were a major influence on the European branch of the sexual revolution. Now, of course, freedom was the excuse and justification that most public figures used to make their arguments for sexual liberation, but a more realistic look at their philosophy and behavior could see them as simply perverts looking for any excuse to normalize their behavior to the world. Now, many people listening to this are probably wondering, where was the right-wing response to all of this? Unfortunately, the right-wing response to the sexual revolution was extremely weak. Since World War II,
Because they all want it as well. It is this whole thing about, well, they watch pornos too, you see? And if you really go against it, where the hell am I going to get my porn?
conservatives largely adopted liberal notions of individual liberty and anti-authoritarianism. Because of the Cold War and battle with communism, they also ignored how capitalistic companies were directly using sexual degeneracy for profit. Their arguments against communist authoritarianism undermined their own ability to regulate culture in the US. To put it simply, many so-called conservatives were more concerned with conserving their money than traditional values.
Yes.
Even today, American conservatives still suffer from this same problem, and many have simply given up on governing at all and have adopted libertarianism.
I think that the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism. Than the conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Yeah.
So, where does this all leave us in the year 2023? As I said at the beginning of the video, we are still living under the regime of the sexual revolution. When we look at the fruits of what it brought our society, it's hard to call it anything other than a complete catastrophe.
Yeah.
Let's begin by looking at the state of the American family. Illegitimacy rates were less than 10% in 1960. In the 2010s, they rose to above 40%. Illegitimacy, of course, has many negative outcomes, such as increasing crime and lowering educational attainment. Family formation has become very hard in modern America, and divorce is common. The decline of the family structure has led to youth mental illness, suicide, and drug abuse to reach their highest level ever recorded.
Yeah.
Male suicide in particular increased because the male role in society is now unclear. Because of the sexual revolution, men went from being the leaders of Western civilization to cogs in a genderless machine.
We're going to leave it here. I have the link in the description for this video. You can have a look at it and watch it. It's, there's a couple of nice conclusions, but I want to have a look at what else, because we were talking about the agenda and we were talking about what is going on here. There's something else that developed parallel to all of this, and it's kind of strange. Because I said it a couple of times, well, this, do as thou wilt and all of that, that is devil's talk. That is the talk of the devil. And we can extrapolate pretty easily what would happen if everybody just do as they want. And it's not that, well, people have their own morale. No, they don't. They don't. They just want what they want. You know this from kids. Kids don't know what morale is, and you have to teach them that, right? And so they go pounce on each other and they do all sorts of real evil crap. And because they're weaker than adults, they don't, cause as much damage, obviously. But the point is really that at some stage, this is going to just become the worst thing that we would ever imagine. It is going to be chaos and murder on the streets, right? Which we actually already have in a lot of places. I mean, in America, which is absolutely crazy. So I just want to put something in, parallel to this, where all this stuff was developing. Something else that was developing, just like that, in the background, and then not really in the background at all. So let's have a look at this.
This is the second video in a 3-part series on Dark Hollywood. In the first video, we covered Hollywood's connections to some of the darkest criminal organizations in American history.
Oh, come on. Come on. What is up, Internet? You don't want this? What's up? Yes. Dark Hollywood, of course. So let's have a see if we can't just get this stuff going for real.
We covered Hollywood's connections to some of the darkest criminal organizations in American history.
Oh my god. Well, that kind of will tell us something, won't it? That we can't play this or what? We're just going to reboot this and see if we'll get closer to it. And it just won't do it, huh? If that's the case, we might just watch the end of it. Well, actually, you know what? You do know that the occult and devil worship and all of that kind of stuff was going on at the same time. Hollywood was doing this since the 60s, even before that, since Hollywood started. It was all the occult. Well, it seems to start again now. Let's have a look. Because I really wanted to integrate this.
This is the second video in a three-part series on Dark Hollywood. In the first video, we covered Hollywood's connections to some of the darkest criminal organizations in American history. The second video will be on the occult Hollywood, emphasize on Satanism and its influence on the Hollywood elites. And the third video will be on the high-end criminal cases in Hollywood and the system that protects all of this. So, buckle up.
And obviously what we're trying to say is this is, as he said, is for educational purposes only, number one. Number two, allegedly, right? It's all allegedly, just for your information. Nice and spooky, huh?
Jayne Mansfield was a Hollywood actress and one of the biggest symbols of the 1960s Hollywood scene. She was, depending on what angle you looked from, the natural successor, or rather a wannabe, Marilyn Monroe. Besides all that, Mansfield was also a member of the Church of Satan, a religious organization founded by the eccentric, horn-wearing occultist named Anton LaVey. A dark showman from birth, LaVey met Jayne Mansfield during her drug-induced trip to the 1966 San Francisco Film Festival. Accounts say that Mansfield was charmed by LaVey, and the two quickly became romantically involved. Mansfield joined the Church of Satan and was often photographed in satanic rituals conjured by LaVey. The starlet, however, had a boyfriend at the time, a Hollywood power insider and lawyer named Sam Brody. LaVey was sort of a side lover, a Hollywood stunt for her, if you will. Brody was extremely disapproving of LaVey's and Mansfield's relationship, threatening that he would destroy LaVey's life. In return, it's said that LaVey and his congregation performed a satanic ritual to curse Brody to death. LaVey urged Mansfield not to get into a car with Brody, as he was targeted to die. Now, whatever you may believe, on the 9th of June 29th, 1967, Mansfield and Brody were driving through Louisiana when a truck crashed into their car.
Wow.
Mansfield was decapitated.
That's why I put the subtitles in there, because he always gets cut out, right? So we can hear and see what he actually said, right? Decapitated was just kind of, that's YouTube, I think. But now, just for because of course he's telling stories, we're just getting into this, that this is happening at the same time as all this sexual revolution thing is happening, to what we just heard from Hollywood and how this whole Hollywood thing started, and how more and more people became more degenerate. Like, what is behind it? And I was saying it is demonic, and of course it's demonic. That's the name for it, you see? Like, what else do you want to call it?
Anton LaVey, being a sort of master provocateur, claimed responsibility for this event. His curse was successful.
Imagine.
Whatever happened, LaVey was
What about Charlie Kirk? You had these witches cursing him, And of course, they didn't do this. They didn't say that they were successful. They didn't wish death upon him and blah, blah, blah. But they actually did. Of course they did. Right? And but this guy is like, he's just audacious as hell and no problem at all. He just takes responsibility for it.
Undoubtedly, one of the most prominent counterculture figures and occultists of old Hollywood. Having founded the Church of Satan, LaVey became a sort of satanic advisor to Hollywood big shots. He was an inspiration and a key figure in Hollywood's satanic cinematography of the late 1960s and early 1970s. In fact, he was a close associate to director Roman Polanski, having been hired by him as an advisor on the satanic blockbuster Rosemary's Baby. However, because of all this theatricality, his role in the Church of Satan later diminished as he was seen as a sort of tabloid media Satanist, disrespecting the true nucleus of real devil worshippers.
Oh, he disrespected real devil worshippers. Wow. Now, this is more of a storyline, but if you generalize it, right, you'll know why I combine it with the other video.
What the world needs is a good whipping.
No, that's what you people need. And I'm sure it's going to come to you.
Part of his flock split from the Church of Satan and formed a much more secretive, darker organization called the Temple of Seth, led by an alleged deep state occultist and tracker United States Army Lieutenant Colonel
Not tracker, human trafficker.
Michael Aquino. But whatever his faith was, LaVey was certainly one of the most pivotal figures in introducing Satanism and occultism into the Hollywood mainstream. Now, the before-mentioned director Roman Polanski and his wife actress Sharon Tate were allegedly both steeped in Satanism. Before Sharon's murder by Charlie Manson's cult members in the infamous Tate LaBianca murders, the home of Polanski and Tate was a sort of epicenter for Hollywood's satanic scene. Actor Dennis Hopper spoke in interviews about sadistic movies being filmed at their house featuring some of the biggest Hollywood names.
Yeah, satanic movements. I think we're getting what is being filtered out here.
Hollywood actor and singer Sammy Davis Jr., himself a devout Satanist, you can see him here with LaVey and Aquino, said that all 5 victims at the Tate Cielo Drive residence had at one time or another been into Satanism. Now, what is even more peculiar is that LaVey's Church of Satan also had connections with the murderers, the members of Charlie Manson's cult. One of Manson's close associates, Bobby Beausoleil, was connected to LaVey through an underground filmmaker and occultist, Kenneth Anger, whom he met in 1967 and who allegedly became Beausoleil's lover. Anger was close friends with LaVey, with whom he opened a nightclub called The Witch's Sabbath. One of Charlie Manson's girls and the perpetrators of the Tate LaBianca murders was Susan Atkins, who was reportedly one of the dancers at LaVey and Anger's nightclub. Atkins reportedly credited LaVey with starting her down the road of murder. However, Beausoleil and Atkins were only so much influenced by LaVey's Satanism, as much as they were influenced by their later, more devious leader, Charles Manson. A sort of devilish Svengali, Charlie Manson was a serial offender ever since he was a boy and spent time in and out of institutions. In fact, he was at one point briefly housed at Boys Town, Nebraska, which was later identified by many investigators as a cesspool of pedophilic operations that had ties to much larger nationwide rings. Charlie...
I thought that the subtitles were taken from the original, but the words that are cut out by YouTube are also cut out. It's a bit of a shame, you know?
Manson came to the California scene somewhere in the 1960s and quickly started to acquire followers in the hippie community. Although his rise in that scene is shrouded in mystery with inklings of high-level intelligence involvement, it was written by some that Charlie Manson was reportedly involved in drug trafficking and contract killings, and that he had become involved in the underworld child pornography scene. Similar allegations were faced by some other actors of this story. Michael Aquino, for instance. Interestingly, it was also said that many of the victims of Manson's cult were in some way also involved in the child pornography industry.
Child pornography. Even here, they cut it out.
Although LaVey's Church of Satan had obvious connections to and influence on the Manson family, another, much more secretive and sinister religious group supposedly had a larger role. In the 1960s, two occultists, Mary Ann McLean and Robert de Grimston, broke off of the Church of Scientology and formed a secret, underground religious group called the Process Church of the Final Judgment.
My God.
With its dangerous ideology and the modus operandi of the finest Scientology teachings, the church began spreading throughout the United Kingdom and the United States, especially Hollywood.
There we go.
The church's activities attracted the interests of a number of Hollywood celebrities. However, their influence allegedly spread also to Charlie Manson and his disciples. Preaching of an imminent, violent Armageddon, it was believed that the Process Church's influence was one of the main reasons for the Tate LaBianca murders, whose true motives are still unclear and highly debated. Manson was also reportedly a frequent visitor at the New Age Esalen Institute, where the Process Church reportedly lectured occasionally, even just a few days before the Tate LaBianca murders. Actually, on the very day of the murders, someone from within the Polanski home placed a call to the Institute for reasons unknown. Satanic occult influence was very much present in Manson's orbit.
It's kind of weird, right? That these people would have the swastika on their forehead, right? It's kind of weird the way the hippie type of thing, and they were all liberal and they were all leftist and so on, but then they would have the swastika. That has to do with the fact that fascism is leftist. I mean, of course they are.
Fully black-painted bus and a temple with Baphomet's image tucked inside, just like Anton LaVey had a fully black-painted house in San Francisco. However, the Process Church influence spread far beyond Charles Manson. In the book The Ultimate Evil, journalist Maury Terry investigates the famous Son of Sam serial killings, claiming with a lot of suspicious evidence that David Berkowitz, aka Son of Sam, was not a lone serial killer, but rather a fall guy for a satanic cult offshoot of the Process Church. At the very least, Berkowitz himself admitted that the church's teachings had a huge influence on his deeds.
So I was calling upon this demonic entity, this druid spirit, and it was like he was reaching out to me. In my mind, felt I was really getting messages from him. I was reading literature from a church called the Process Church of Final Judgment. I was using some of that literature, which was calling on to start anarchy and try to bring in the end of the world.
Maury also claimed that Roy Radin, a Hollywood producer and show business promoter, was connected to Satanism and the Process Church of the Final Judgment, and that he was potentially the leader of this violent offshoot of the Process Church that blended Scientology.
It's kind of strange, isn't it? This story, it seems to have nothing to do with what we just listened to, but it's happening at the same time. This type of stuff is spreading. As this other guy was saying, that the more Christianity was pushed aside, all of a sudden you had this influx, the gates are open for all sorts of other stuff. And it's kind of weird that it's never another church that would preach good morals or anything like that, or a real good ethical structure. It's never that. It's always degeneracy and this complete stupidity, because none of this is fucking real, of course. I mean, it's imagination. You can imagine anything, of course you can. And because of the fact that we can just use our imagination to imagine the most stupidest and weirdest things, of course there is this, you know, that's why we have science, for instance, you know, to be able to differentiate between imagination and reality. And then even science now doesn't even know what reality is anymore. What in the hell? What is going on? It is complete craziness and a willingness to be willingly ignorant, willingly stupid. What the hell is this stuff? It's just so that you can have room and to do the most degenerate stuff.
Christianity and Satanism, and that ultimately inspired the Son of Sam murders. Furthermore, rumors suggest that Roy Radin was heavily involved in the film industry, and that the Son of Sam murders were in part done to facilitate his customers. Radin was ultimately killed by a contract killer named William Menser, a man who was connected to Charles Manson and his circle. Supposedly, Radin was killed because of a financial dispute over the Hollywood musical crime drama The Cotton Club, directed by Francis Ford Coppola and starring a bunch of Hollywood actors: Richard Gere, Diane Lane, Lawrence Fishburne, Nicolas Cage, and others. Interestingly, the financial backer of the movie, besides Roy Radin, was the Saudi arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi, one of Jeffrey Epstein's associates. I mean, it is clear that satanic and occult connections thrived in Hollywood from its inception, not only on the highest
From its inception. Okay?
levels, but also on the lower, street levels. Satanic cults were popping up all over Hollywood. For instance, the Brotherhood of the Ram or the Cathedral of the Fallen Angel on Hollywood Boulevard. In July of 1984, a fire broke out at Ram Center in Hollywood, an occult retail store. After the fire, the police discovered a back room described as a place where devil worship rituals took place. Inside, they found a coffin, 2 human skeletons, and 6 preserved human fetuses. No charges were filed, as the officials classified them as medical specimens. Now, all of these occult figures, Manson, de Grimston, LaVey, drew their inspiration from probably the most influential occultist of all time,
Here it comes.
nicknamed the wickedest man in the world, Aleister Crowley.
There you go. And you find this guy on the Beatle, on the cover of one of the Beatle albums, and so on. This stuff is no conspiracy theory. It's just open. If you talk about it, oh, you're a conspiracist, of course. But like, it's just open knowledge if you just have a look around. It's the weirdest shit you'd ever come across. You see, and that's happening parallel to this strange sexual revolution. Oh yeah, that's all it was. Of course it was. It was the only thing that was going on.
Crowley was a flamboyant, controversial English occultist and mystic who founded the religion of Thelema, based on the principle, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law."
There we go. That's why it is parallel.
Or rather, do whatever you feel like. This seemingly hedonistic ideology was in reality entangled in occult satanic symbolism and ideology, and the real dangers of it arose from the misinterpretation of Thelema as a license to do whatever you want to anyone.
There you go. So that's why it's going to be their downfall, obviously. Because other people who do actually have morale, the reason why it always takes so long is because of morale. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying that at a certain stage, at a certain point, those people who do actually have morale, the Christians, are going to have to do something about this. And I'm sure they will, as they've always done. And these people can't complain, because whatever is good for you is good for us just as much, right? Do whatever it is that you want to anyone. So that can go the other way around as well. This is what these damn idiots always forget.
Such ideology could lead the psychologically disturbed to commit horrific acts.
Oh, really?
Nevertheless, his occult ideology and the persona of Aleister Crowley spread through Hollywood elites like wildfire. Jimmy Page adored him and even bought his house. The Beatles put him on the cover of Sgt.
There you go.
Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Ozzy Osbourne had a song dedicated to him called the Mr. Crowley.
That song. I mean, when I first heard that song as a kid, I didn't know it was about him, right?
In 1902, German occultist Karl Kellner founded Ordo Templi Orientis, a secret occult society which was eventually taken over by Crowley, who became its most influential leader. Crowley eventually appointed Wilfred Smith as the head of the North American branch of the order, who opened a lodge in Los Angeles and quickly started to spread its teachings through Hollywood. Smith organized masses, luring Hollywood celebrities to attend them. By masses, I actually mean mass O.R.G., if you know what I mean, with Hollywood big shots of the time. One of the wives Smith seduced was that of Jack Parsons, a pioneer rocket scientist who co-founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which later became NASA's primary center for robotic space exploration. But besides being one of the fathers of NASA, he was also an occultist and Crowley's disciple who took over the leadership of Ordo Templi Orientis from Smith. Jack Parsons also had an extremely close and weird ritualistic relationship with the founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. Some reports even suggested they were lovers. These shadow groups may have also been one of the inspirations for Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, his last movie, featuring an unnamed cabal of powerful people at an orgy in a mansion. Kubrick died shortly after an executive screening of the movie, and it was theorized that the executives cut a more gruesome, revealing part of this cult from the film. Theories alleged that Kubrick was trying to expose some real-life high society cult that ultimately got him unalived.
His wife was really against it, Kubrick's wife. She didn't want him to make that movie. I think she was afraid for him, you know. The thing is, like, take from it what you will. Of course, you don't know if this is true or not, but it's kind of revealing in all the same, isn't it?
Well, it is known from Stanley Kubrick's own archives that one of the vast research materials he used for the film was a book called The Cults and the Occult by Francis X. King. In it, the author explores various aspects of the occult and witchcraft in modern history, but most importantly, it delves into the tantric cults that operated in New York City in the 20th century. The setting of Eyes Wide Shut was also in New York. Now, one of the most pivotal figures in the tantric cult scene was a man named Pierre Bernard, who established one such secretive cult, which he ran from a mansion in New York. Bernard's congregation was, of course, an orgy-type gathering that attracted a lot of rich and powerful people at the time. Bernard was also, prior to setting up his cult, accused of human trafficking and sexual abuse of young women.
There you go. It's always about sexuality, isn't it? So what is going on? I mean, what the hell is going on? It's about changing laws so that you can openly live out your degeneracy. And then if you look at Pride Parade and all that kind of stuff, you know that this is the source of it all if you have a feeling for, you know, religiosity. Now, I'm not a religious person in the sense of religion because I don't like the whole institutional part of it. But that's not really the point. If you think about morale and ethics, I mean, you'd have to know that obviously those are the stepping stones towards this kind of stuff. It has to be, right? I will put the link in the description for the rest of the video. It's just that I don't want this video to get too long. But I mean, there isn't that much left to it. How much is there? Another 8 minutes or so. And you can watch the rest of it. I just give him an upvote. Well done. Nicely put together. I mean, I'm not saying this is true. Of course not. This is for educational purposes only. It's the type of thing where you just say, isn't that weird? Like, is that what's going on? And then you have a look at the literature and you have a look at the history of it, and you'd have to conclude that, well, I mean, even if 50% of that was true, you would still have to come to the same conclusion. The way the Bible states it, it's the devil, right? It's evil, and the reason for why it is evil is because it destroys everything. Of course, you need some sort of structure, a social, pathway, so that a human being can grow up and be, I don't want to use words like enlightened, because of the Enlightenment. That's another thing that these people do. They take words that sound positive and that have nothing to do with them. Sexual revolution. Oh, you know, we're free, sexually free. And what happened? Nobody is actually having sex anymore. You go to OnlyFans or something like that, right? It's not that men and women come together now. No, it's like men go with men and women go with women, and you have all these... an whole herd of lonely women because nobody wants them anymore because they're just gone crazy. Men that don't want anything to do with society anymore. There's something really strange going on right now, and they're going to surface, and we're going to see that ugly head of what is behind all of this. And there is no other words that describe it more precisely than evil or the devil. I think it's kind of weird as well, or kind of cool, that the Bible describes it as the beast, because that's what the beast is, right? I mean, if you look at animals, they have an order. But if you take animals and you let them think and do whatever they want, right? They don't have a moral code. Their behavior is dominated by instincts. But just say that they could just think up whatever the hell it is they want to think up, you'd have complete chaos. And this is what's happening with the human animal, because of the fact that we can think up all sorts of crap. And then why is it always children? Like, why? What the hell is wrong with you people? As if it isn't enough to sleep around. It isn't enough, the gay and the whole thing, as if that isn't enough. No, it has to go on. And bestiality, wait and watch when that surfaces. It's always been there in the background, but they haven't really, brought up the courage for it yet. But we will see it. Muslims do it already, but it's like, it's so looked down upon in the West that, they haven't really mustered the courage to say, we want to have this, we want to do this. But child marriage is already a thing that the West is kind of saying, well, it's their culture. Well, what in the... we have a culture of our own, and it's Christian, okay? And what the hell, why do we make room for all of this crap? They can go to their countries and they can do this stuff in their countries the way they feel like it. We don't have to have that here. What the hell is wrong with you people? But that'll conclude the video for today. I think that's stuff to think about. We can have a look at this and say and ask ourselves, first of all, what's behind it, and where is this supposed to go? Like, how far is this supposed to go? And this whole thing of no limits, right? No boundaries. Where is that going to end? We are logical enough, we can think. We know that this is going to end in an absolute catastrophe. And then, I can tell you, then there will be very strict laws. Of course there will. Because that's the only way to get us people under control. If we don't control ourselves, the control has to come from outside. So, demoralize the population, and then they will cry out for control. And the control has to come from outside. And at last, they have what they always wanted, what they always pretended not to want, is the fascist state that has nothing to do with the way fascism was, right? But that they have complete authority over absolutely everybody. And imagine that the Bible has prophesied that, and then that thing has to be taken down completely. They want the world, they want to control everybody. Why? Because they're evil. And evil is as jealous and envious as you can possibly be. You're not allowed to smile, you're not allowed to be happy anymore. They're even jealous of children and the way children can just be happy. They play with their whatever toys and stuff like that and just happy. They can be happy for hours with a ball, some sort of a ball, a football or a basketball or whatever. But because of sexuality and not putting it in its place, right? Adults can't be happy anymore. It's quite amazing. So there's stuff to think about. We're going to conclude the video at this stage. And as I said, both of these videos are going to be links in the description. You can have a look at them and watch them to the end. I think we've touched on the subject well enough. So all that's left to do is to say, God bless you all. Till next time, bye-bye.